And here we are, everyone. End of August, and we are about to enter the 7th month that we are living in and with this unprecedented situation in all of our lives, this pandemic. And as time marches on, and as we continue to I think we continue to get at deeper and deeper levels as time goes on, that life as we knew it is not returning to normal, whatever normal is, anytime soon. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, that one of the challenges we face with this situation is the fact that this is kind of an ongoing crisis, an ongoing disaster, if you want. That sense of there being a light at the end of the tunnel that we normally look for when we are in times of crisis or when we're in disaster situations. That light at the end of the tunnel seems to keep eluding us as time marches on here. And what we're facing, this feeling that we don't know when or how this is all going to resolve itself, that lack of knowing, that lack of resolution makes this pandemic a particularly challenging thing to go through for us as humans. Living with an extended sense of unknown, without any clear end in sight, is really challenging for the human brain. Our brain, our nervous system, our very biology is wired to want to know, want to plan, want to have a clear idea of what's coming next, what to expect. It's sort of hardwired into us to be in control. That's how we feel a sense of safety and security. And so our minds like having that clear solution, that clear plan, that thing we can count on. And one thing the pandemic has sort of shoved in our face is that there is an instability. There's nothing that we can, in the external world anyway, reliably count on right now. And so we're faced with, in a way, what the task has always been on the spiritual journey. We're faced with this almost every single day in our lives, this huge and ongoing task of letting go over and over, or letting go of our ideas of how it should be, how it should look, letting go of our ideas of what we want, what we think is supposed to happen, letting go of our ideas about timeline. When are we going to get through this? Letting go, an ongoing invitation. And I know it doesn't seem like an invitation for many of us. Seems like a very hard task to live in that state of constantly being asked to let go and not really having any choice about it. I read an article early this week where a psychologist described the state we're living in. The term she used to describe it is a state of indefinite uncertainty. And she went on to say that as human beings, when we've faced, disasters or crises in the past, we sort of can look around and see the impact of those and kind of, predict how we're going to get through that and the end of that. And yet she was saying, with the coronavirus pandemic, it's a very different kind of disaster. You can't tangibly, look outside and say, oh, okay, here's the damage and here's how we'll repair. But that doesn't mean that there's not damage and loss. For many of us, there's a profound sense of loss, sense of devastation. The challenge with it is it's kind of an ongoing sense of loss. And that's what I want to address today, which is how do we navigate this ongoing, continued sense of loss and grief that we feel personally and when you look around clearly collectively, we've lost so much in these months. You know, some people have lost people, loved ones, maybe to COVID, maybe to something else within these last 7 months. Some people have lost just their own physical health has deteriorated. Um, all of us have lost the ability to connect in person with our extended networks of friends, of family. You know, we've lost the ability to gather and be together physically and get the group hugs, the support, the touching of hands, to feel the energy that can only come from being together physically. I know we can bring about some of it on Zoom, but there's something that's missing. There is a loss of us not being able to physically be together. And to different degrees, we've all lost our way of life, our routines. You know, some of us have lost jobs or suffered a loss of income. There's clearly been a loss of trust in our government, a loss of freedom to move and do what we want to do. Those of you that are parents, you've lost a lot of time to yourself, and you've had to become, you know, teachers overnight. Students and teachers have lost the benefits of being together in person. And so, and then the society, as a society, we've lost the rituals that we're so used to, that you know, that this ability to come together to kind of commemorate these key times in a life, whether that's a wedding, whether that's a funeral, whether that's a graduation, and even the more ordinary rituals, right, of being able to just get up and go to the gym or meet somebody at the coffee shop. So this ongoing sense of this continued loss, and the fact that we don't know when we'll be able to retrieve so much of that, brings up another level of grief for us. You could call it ongoing grief, right? And even though it's ongoing grief, the same stages of grief still apply. You know, the stages of grief that we would go through even if we just lost something permanently, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Those are the, you know, stages of grief. And you can probably see, even in me just naming those, oh yeah, I've been in all of those in these 7 months. Denial at times, or just, I can't believe this is happening, that feeling. Anger, outrage, bargaining, trying to bargain our way through this, and well, what about this, and what about that, and can't we do this, and what if we did that, and all of the mental bargaining that we do when we're dealing with grief and loss. Depression, maybe not clinical depression, although we know the rates of clinical depression have risen dramatically in these months, but we can all feel a sense of depression, hopelessness. And then finally, acceptance. I'm sure you've all had a moment, at least in these 7 months, of just, okay, I accept that this is what is happening right now, and the momentary surrender and peace that can come with that. So we've cycled through these, and we will continue to cycle through these stages of grief indefinitely. That's the challenge, right? Is that this is an indefinite process that we find ourselves in. And what I wanted to support us with today is to recognize that we are grieving, and that we are cycling through these different phases of grief, and to see if we can go through it more consciously. My sense is, when we can go through this process of grieving and honor it in more conscious ways, and face it with a little more presence, a little more compassion, that it actually can help us in some strange way cope and move forward, even with these losses that this situation presents. If we can allow ourselves to, what I would call, consciously grieve, doing that in a way helps us integrate what's happened, and helps us accept what's happened, and helps us move forward with more resiliency, with more grace in the face of what's happened. Tara Brach, who is a psychologist and a Buddhist spiritual teacher, says consciously grieving is at the center of any spiritual path. It is soul work, healthy, cleansing, and intelligent. The process of consciously grieving allows us to metabolize the pain of loss and continue living. It lets us open to love again. By honoring what we've lost, we're able to embrace what's still here. So that's sort of, in my mind, the gift that grieving can give us. If we don't grieve consciously, we can find ourselves at times turning bitter, shutting our heart down, getting resentful. And I know I've had quite a few moments of that in these 7 months, of starting to feel my heart getting hardened. And that's always a red flag to me of, oh, okay, what needs to be felt, what needs to be processed through me. And when I can do that, my heart can be open again to life, to love, to loss, to being present to what's in front of me. And so having some kind of practice, some kind of conscious grieving practice, which I'm going to offer to you today and guide you through, I think is another essential tool in our tool belt to help us navigate over these next few months, over potentially the next year, couple years, however long we're in this situation. And I know, the word grief can bring up stuff for us, and I've worked with many people over the years, and one of the common fears people have in being asked to turn towards and face their grief is, I don't want to do that. I might be stuck there forever. I might not get out of that. I might just end up being overwhelmed with that painful emotion. And that is a very common fear that our mind has, that I'll get lost there, I'll get stuck there. I want to remind you and encourage your own mind, if it has that thought as we go through this practice, that the good news, that one of the Buddha's fundamental teachings and law of nature, if we just look to nature, is that nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. We are in a constant flux of change. And even the most painful emotion, if we really study it, it comes, it exists for a while, and it changes. And the same is true for grief. And actually, the more we push that down, that's actually what keeps it stuck. When we are willing to feel it, it's like an inner release valve opens up in the system, and the pipe that was clogged by us pushing it down suddenly gets unclogged, and we find a greater release. Even with grief, we find a greater release when we connect and let ourselves experience that.